It's our weekly visit with TSN hockey insider Pierre LeBrun. In case you missed it, ladies and gentlemen, the Winnipeg Jets are the top team in the National Hockey League. They have just one loss this season. They continue to impress. And we knew they'd be competitive, Pierre. I just don't know if we appreciated how good they would be. Maybe we focused too much on the guys they lost in the offseason and didn't appreciate the guys they still had. And how about Kevin Cheveldayoff? Maybe the toughest GM job. You and I have talked about it a ton. Lots of no-trade lists that you have to deal with. What can you say about the job that Cheveldayoff and company have done in Winnipeg?
Yeah, they've done a tremendous job. And you know, why ask me? The better opinion, I asked a rival GM about the Jets, Jay, and he said to me, you know, they are as legit as they get, is what this rival GM said about the Winnipeg Jets. He loves the way they're layered. He says they're a lineup that is layered in a way that they can sustain injury to key players more than most teams in the cap system. Some of the contracts that Cheveldayoff has signed on this team, Kyle Connor at $7.1 million. Are you kidding me? I mean, they have managed their cap incredibly well. And they are a team that has it all in terms of having the capabilities of going deep in these playoffs. But that's where they have to prove it, because I think the reason, Jay, that not that many people had picked them as their cup pick before this year is the way they looked so bad in the opening round of the playoffs last year. You know, those tend to leave the kind of impressions that run deeper than what they did in the regular season last year. So that's when they're going to have to answer again about how real they are. I think they're real. But Connor Hellebuyck has to be better. Their entire team has to be better defensively than what they showed against Colorado last year. And you know what? I think they will be. I like this GM said about the Jets. They are legit.
And then there's the elephant in the room about the Jets. It's terrific on-ice product. They've been nothing but successful, and yet they still continue to struggle with attendance. They moved to 11-1 on Sunday in a victory, and there were several thousand empty seats. I know the league is concerned, ownership's concerned. What can you tell us about the situation?
Well, and they should be. Because, you know, the alarm was sounded last year. Remember when Darren Dreger did the sit-down for TSN with Mark Chipman, and then there was a big story in The Athletic from Chris Johnston. And the Jets certainly poured in a lot of their efforts in the offseason to try and address some of the concerns from season ticket holders. And they did raise the bar a bit. They went from 9,500 full season equivalents to 10,000 entering this season. So there was a bit of an uptick, Jay. But the bottom line is they've had one sellout since the start of the year, and that was last week against the Toronto Maple Leafs. Of course, they're probably going to sell out against the Toronto Maple Leafs. Otherwise, they've not had another sellout, not even their home opener against Sidney Crosby and the Penguins. Sunday, they were under 13,000, Jay, and I think it is, again, concerning. And what do you do about it? Listen, they have an amazing owner, a deep-pocketed owner, so that's not an issue, but I think they certainly are concerned if they're going to have more crowds like they did on Sunday, and they're hoping they won't. So again, something to monitor, and something that has not gone away since Dregs and CJ talked about this last year.
Auston Matthews is a heavy favorite to repeat as the Rocket Richard winner. Only 5 goals in 12 games so far this year. I mean, it's still pretty good, but, you know, he's set the bar so high, Pierre. That's the problem. How do you account for somewhat decreased production this year compared to the way he started last season?
I will say, though, his empty netter last week against, Seattle, off the bank, that was one of the prettiest empty netters I've ever seen.
Cool.
But otherwise, yeah, no, he's not. If Austin was on with us right now, he'd say he's probably surprised he's only at 5 goals. I'm not concerned. I mean, his shooting percentage is very low for him. I mean, there's going to be positive regression from his 5-on-5 shooting percentage. And, you know, where I think it will start to turn is when he starts getting his candy on the power play, because he's also shooting low there on the power play. And I think his issues are somewhat tied to his team's power play struggles, right? The Leafs are 31st in the NHL on the power play, which is mind-boggling for a unit that's been top 5, top 10 over the last 4 or 5 years. Way too much talent on this group, on this unit, to be where they are. And, you know, I think, you know, within the Leafs organization, there's obviously belief that they will snap out of this. But I think it does underline some of the urgency when they went to a 5-forward power play unit. Although I do like Mitch Marner being the quarterback. It was kind of neat. But within the organization, I can tell you, no one thinks having 5 forwards on their first power play unit is a long-term solution. It's just that, this has become a bit mental for the Leafs, their struggles on the power play, and they just have to get out of this. They hope that their power play goal Sunday night will be the start of something good for them. But it's a long way of saying, Jay, I really think the power play struggles are so tied to Auston Matthews not quite scoring like we're used to, because he had 18 power play goals last year out of those 69 goals. He feeds off that. He's so dangerous with that extra ice on the man advantage. So, listen, I'm not worried about Auston Matthews. He is going to start popping them, but it's certainly going to help when the power play starts to produce as well.
We got to talk about the Four Nations face-off. We talk about it on every single show. We're obsessed with it, Pierre. Team Sweden, they've already named 3 defensemen to their team: Victor Hedman, Erik Karlsson, Gustav Forsling. But as you and I both know, Sweden just loaded with more defensemen that they could potentially add to the squad. How do you see that back end looking when their full roster is named?
Yeah, Jay, it's very much the strength of their team. I had a chance to interview Sam Hallam, who's the head coach of their team for Sweden, last week, and he's proud of that depth, but it does give him some difficult decisions to make between now and December 2nd. You mentioned the 3 that are already on. That leaves just 4 spots, 4 guys to be named, because it's a short 23-man roster. Only 7D make it. They've got to pick between Rasmus Dahlin, Rasmus Andersson, Matthias Ekholm, Jonas Brodin, Hampus Lindholm, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, and Adam Larsson, among others. But just trying to pick 4 out of those 7, yeah, enjoy that. Enjoy, making 3 guys who log 20 minutes a night and pretty angry when you tell them they're not making it. And we joke, but it's going to be terrible to hear that news for those 3 guys, just like it will be for whoever is on the bubble for Canada, the U.S., and Finland, because a lot of the players are viewing this Four Nations event, Jay, as an entryway, as an inside lane to staying in the core for the Olympics in Italy.
Yeah.
Let's not sugarcoat it. This is all about teeing up the Olympics in Italy for all these players. And if you don't make this roster for Four Nations, it's not necessarily the end of the world, because there'll be performances that go up and down among these players. But boy, is it an inside lane to make it. So again, Sam Hallam said it's great to have this depth. And he's got some ideas about where he's headed, but he's going to break some hearts. And, the one thing for them, too, by the way, is that Sam Hallam, the head coach, makes the final roster call. It's not like Finland, Sweden, U.S., where it's a GM. Yeah. Swedish tradition in all sports, he explained to me, is that the head coach wears the 2 hats, GM and coach. He will decide, who makes this roster. And it's interesting because he doesn't have any real NHL ties in his own career. He's a Swedish national coach. He's had a lot of success, but he's relying on Patrick Hornquist as his assistant GM. Hornquist from the Florida Panthers, now in their front office. And he's picking the brain of Daniel Alfredsson as well, the Ottawa Senators assistant coach. So it'd be interesting.
Okay, let's get back to the NHL, Pierre. It feels like Boston's back-to-back shutout wins were like a life preserver for a franchise that was really floundering to start the season. And they lose to Carolina 8-2 last week. That capped a slide of 5 losses in 6 games. Some issues with the coach and the players, certainly. You talked to GM Don Sweeney on Monday. How is he feeling about this team 13 games into the season?
Well, you mentioned it. I mean, he certainly hopes that these 2 wins, back-to-back wins, heading into the big game in Toronto on Tuesday night, Don Sweeney hopes that these 2 back-to-back wins are the start of the turnaround, to use his words. He feels that maybe they've played more to their identity finally in those back-to-back wins. And as you mentioned, he truly hopes that thrashing at the hands of Carolina last week was the turning point, that was rock bottom, and now they're on their way back. But one of the interesting things that the Bruins GM said to me, Jay, when he talked about, the opening month and a slow start for his team, and he said, quote, "You've got a lot of players that are off to a slow start," end quote. In other words, this isn't about one specific area or 1 or 2 key guys. He's talking about a long list of players when he analyzes his roster that have all gotten off to slow starts together, which I think has been really surprising to him and to everyone in the Bruins organization. But again, they hope now that they've turned the corner. Having said that, even in their win on Sunday, David Pastrnak was benched for the 3rd period. And so they're still trying to find their way here. And in the middle of it, you mentioned the coach, Jim Montgomery, is on an expiring deal, and that in itself in an original six market always makes headlines no matter how the team is playing. And you know what Don Sweeney said to me is that, you know, he has had extension talks before the season with Jim Montgomery. Obviously, it didn't lead to one, but he said just like his pending UFA players that he will continue to keep the door open in terms of extension talks, including for his coach. So we'll see ultimately if that gets done.
Pierre, we've got to move on to the National Football League. We have some news for you, my friend, and it's something that you're not going to be happy about. Dak Prescott expected to miss several weeks with a hamstring injury. He's seeking a second opinion, as all athletes do nowadays, as you know. The news was worse than expected. That's a quote. Prescott did not play in the fourth quarter of Sunday's loss to Atlanta. He was replaced by Cooper Rush. Have a listen to this.
Really doesn't change anything for us. And even speaking with Dak earlier, I mean, this is about the quarterback room. I mean, we've always invested all the time and energy into the quarterback, you know, Dak that has the football. So now it's Cooper's turn, and Dak will be part of that process. And, you know, we'll rally around him and make sure that we do everything we can and make sure he's prepared, and we'll just keep going about it the way we've gone about it. Our focus is really to go into this and have a game plan to beat the Eagles defense, and we have great confidence in Cooper.
All right, Pierre, how are you feeling about the Cooper Rush era that's about to begin? And overall, how are you feeling about the Cowboys? It's been a rough few weeks for sure.
Yeah, it feels now that this season has gotten away from them. I really felt, A, they had to win in Atlanta, and B, that obviously they didn't have these injuries. We didn't even mention CeeDee Lamb and his shoulder. We'll see if he can go against the Eagles. It feels now like they're trying to plug holes in a sinking ship, and I don't think it's going to happen. I will say my wife looked at me after the Atlanta loss Sunday and said, "Why are you not disappointed like you normally are after a Cowboys loss?" I said, "Because I'm almost relieved, because I think I can now lower the expectations to a point where it's like whatever happens, happens, but at least I'm not teeing myself up for another 12-win season where they lose in the playoffs and it shatters my heart. This is actually, I think, going to answer itself as far as a disappointing year the rest of the way, especially if Dak Prescott is out long term. And for once, maybe they'll get a high draft pick, which they haven't had in a long time.
Right.
So I know I'm trying to talk myself into some
it.
reasoning here, Jay, but it's also realistic, right? I mean, I just don't see, with the no running game, injuries on defense, and now Dak out, how do you cobble this thing together? I think this season's lost.
A realistic, reasonable Cowboys fan. I don't know if I've ever met one of you before, Pierre.
Yeah, I could do without all the analysts, some on our air who seem to be enjoying all this so much. But hey, that's life. That's life.
That's life as a Cowboys fan. Always great to talk to you, Pierre. Hopefully things turn around, and we'll chat with you next week. Thanks again.
Right on, right on.